Okay, so we'll start with the presentation and then we'll get on to the divide and conquer rule and that stuff.
So when is the blog post due?
We'll talk about that later. We may skip this one, depending on timing. Unless you've already got it done, in which case I'll still grade it. So I don't know if anybody already did it.
Get extra points.
My glasses.
Yeah, make sure the mouse is actually on the screen.
Which it is not. Oh, I have to click on it.
No, you review that.
You're right. Nope. It's just not. It wasn't on this screen. It was on the other screen.
On the other thing is
Where do I turn
This
on that?
screen is to
full
the
screen?
right of the other screen. So if you ever can't see the mouse, just keep going right.
Where's that
Closed
that
captioning
voice
is-
thing?
You're on.
You're on Firefox, so it doesn't
Yeah.
count.
That's fine. That's fine.
Oh, if you want to, I can switch it.
No, it doesn't matter. I was just-
Okay.
You just wanted to look at the words next time.
Yeah. It is kind of distracting. Alright, I'm Jimmy Neutron Bomb, Toshiba sales representative. I came here to present some storage options. I know you were, you had Atom Bomb present to you the other day. I came here to blow the competition out of the water.
Hold on.
Already
Are you neutral about your sales?
No.
Oh, your name is Neutron, so
I came here today to show you some storage options for your motherboard. You emailed me about a need for an SSD and a hard drive for the MAG X399 creation. You want a 2 terabyte M.2 PCI solid state drive and a 5 terabyte SATA hard disk drive. Some info about Toshiba. We're a Japanese multinational conglomerate, which is like multiple companies combined. We were founded in 1939 as Tokyo Shiburu Dinki KK. Dinki. The name was changed to Toshiba in 1978. We're headquartered in Tokyo, Japan. We had a revenue in 2016 of $51 million, and in 2016 we also had 187,000, about 188,000 employees. And
It seems
that's the
small.
Headquarters.
I mean, I'd like to have 51 million. Don't get me wrong, but that seems like really. Is that the profits? Because revenue of 51 million seems.
No, that's the revenue. Well, at first I typed in like, it was a much bigger number, but then I realized that it was in yen, so I had to convert it.
Because I mean, if you have 187,000 employees, what are you paying them a nickel? It just seems like.
Is
You know
that,
what I'm saying? It seems like.
is that a quarterly profit or is that a whole year profit?
I mean, if it's
Pretty sure it's
profit,
a whole year.
then I could see that. But if it's gross revenue, I don't know. I'm not going to question your number, but it seems really low for a world.
I could have transferred it wrong, but
Okay.
anyway, change it from
Sorry,
yen,
I'll let you go. But
from yen to dollars.
I mean, that building.
That feels like it has a lot.
It's a big building, and that's not even the manufacturing rate. That's probably just the company headquarters.
Yeah. The motherboard you emailed me about was the MAG. It's a gaming board. It has 8 SATA 6 GB second ports. Should have capitalized this GB. It's got 3 M.2 ports. Supports up to PCIe 3.0 times 4 x4 and SATA 6 GB per second, and it supports all those M.2 sizes. The first storage option is the Toshiba XG5P. It's a 2 terabyte SSD, speed of 32 GTs a second. It has no latency because it's an SSD. Read speeds of 3,000 megabytes a second, write speeds of 2,200 megabytes a second. 320,000 IOPS read and 265,000 IOPS write. It's an SLC, so it has a single memory per core, and it has 1.5 million hours that it's supposed to run without failing. The warranty is a 2-year warranty. It's in the USA, and the cost is $999. Well, it's basically $1,000.
What is that word? 2-year U.S. base?
That's a company.
What?
It's a company.
Oh, it's a company.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought we like misspelled electronics warranty or something.
No, that would
What
be,
the
that
heck
would
is
be
that?
bad.
So, let's see, Mr. Harrison, what does IOPS stand for? Anyone?
Input output per second.
Okay, it's how many inputs or outputs it can do per second. So it's kind of a weird number because when you're saying write is 265,000 input outputs per second. But it's how many things or how many times it can go to write that per second, which is a ridiculously huge number. Anybody know what GT/S stands for? That's 32 GTs per second.
Pretty sure he said
It's like something transfers, I think.
Yeah,
What's the acronym? What's the G?
Giga transfer.
Gigatransfers, right? It's giga. What does that mean? I really don't know.
Me neither.
Billion transfers.
It means it's really high.
That's
You
a
can
lot
do
of
a bunch of
transfers.
stuff.
32
Okay.
billion transfers a second.
Now the M.2 2280 3D NAND, the 2280, I don't think has anything to do with the size of the drive. It has to do with the kind of the generation. So as drives evolved, they got kind of new numbers, and the BIOS had to be updated to take that newer, better kind of M.2 NAND. So when it says it takes these different kind of M.2 NANDs, it's saying, physically the form factor of M.2 drives are all the same between the SATAs and the PCIs. They if you held them up, you wouldn't know which one's which. But the difference is how does the BIOS address it and whether it will work with that version of BIOS. So when you say I've got a 2280, you just have to make sure the BIOS takes and it is updated for the version 2280 M.2.
I just thought they were different sizes because, I know my laptop takes a certain size, and I thought that.
It can take different sizes too, right? Your motherboard could say up to 1 terabyte M.2 drive, but that's a generation thing of kind of as they evolved, they got faster and better, and so it's kind of different. Think of it as kind of the form factor of the M.2, physically them all being the same, but internally they're different because of that whatever controller it is that's on it. So 2 terabytes, $999. What's that come out to be?
Let's see.
God.
1,000.
I mean, 2,000
So
gigabytes,
1,000 divided by
$1,000 would be
2,000.
about.
That's
Yeah, it's like
about-
50 cents.
That's a dollar
0.5 something.
That would be 50 cents, right? It's $1,000,
$2,000.
2,000. So we're looking. So this is definitely our most expensive at 50 cents per meg,
Yeah.
gig per gig, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, it's also the most ridiculously fast. Nobody else did an M.2, did they? But you did.
He did
So-
970.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right. So it was relatively close. Yours was way cheaper than this one, though. I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, it was way cheaper.
Well, 500 gigabytes, you can't beat 100.
But it also wasn't 2 terabytes. So along with SSDs, the higher you go in size, the more you kind of pay per gig for the SSD.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go to the bottom. Bam.
The other drive is a Toshiba X300. It's 5 terabyte drive, speeds of 7,200 RPMs, latency is 4.17 milliseconds.
Cents per gigabyte.
The read and write speeds, couldn't find specifics, but 150 to 220 megabytes per second. Power draw is 6 watts when it's idle and about 11.3 watts when it's active. There's a buffer of 128 megs. The mean time before failure is 600,000 hours, and it has a 2-year warranty backed by Toshiba.
That is a really low TBF. I've never
That
seen
is
one
very
low.
low.
Not that, like we've said, not that it really means anything. But
That's like 3 cents per gigabyte.
What was the cheapest one we had?
Oh, it's like what, 17 cents?
I think there was one that was actually 1 cent, wasn't it?
It is like 1.
I got it. I have
Point
these.
seven.
I have those over here.
This was 2.5 cents per gigabyte. 2.60 per hour.
Yeah, he's got all the
Let's
notes.
go down. I wanna see
Let's see, let's do this. It's 5,000 for 130 bucks.
Okay, so that was
This
4
one's the
cents.
cheapest. Already saying it.
This one's 1.7 cents, which was Cameron's.
Backyard.
Okay.
The backyard hard drive.
Okay, so 130.
2.9 cents on Sid's.
Well, this one's 0.026.
It's 2.5 cents per gig.
So, I mean, 130 for
2.8. I think Cameron's is the least. What was this one?
0.02, so like
2.5 cents.
Cameron's was also the least trusted.
These
The backyard hard
So
drive.
maybe mine's
Just throw them under the bus.
Maybe mine's the cheapest reputable one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's right. It was the cheapest. I forgot. It was the
Max
the,
Digital.
Max.
How could you forget?
Oh, that one that was in the shopping mall, yeah.
Back-
I feel like he was driving through Richmond, saw TJ.
Been open all 3 days out of my buddies.
So yours
Out of the back
yours
of the
looks like it probably is the least expensive per gig for a company that's actually been around for any period of time that anyone's ever heard of, other than people that live in Springfield, Nevada, and drive by the mall. So
Yeah.
I don't know where yours was at. I'm just kidding. Who was it that said they couldn't find a 5 terabyte drive?
Me?
Yeah, you look.
I said it was hard to find.
6, I could have done
Yeah, because there's so many more 4, 6, and 5.
Yeah, 5s are easy
Somebody
to come
could.
by. You just
I-
type in
I
5
can too.
terabyte drive.
Depends on the manufacturer.
I even
Some manufacturers
found
are just lazy.
both of them are Toshiba's, so I only had to do one company. SSD
Wow.
hard drive. So any questions?
I don't have an answer.
I had one, but I forgot it. What was my
Very
question
good.
again?
Yeah.
Did it have, or did it list on the specification page what the operation of the humidity level may be? I know some list.
Some people find one number that nobody else has, and they just have to.
Dig it up.
Some people want to make sure it works in their 186 degrees.
Yeah, 186
Gotta
degrees
make sure,
solid.
man.
I took it to the sun, and it still works. So.
Oh, what was your question?
Does it come with any OS systems on it?
No.
What is it?
Something
What
I
room
found
is
out.
that from?
I
Citation
don't think it's
made
from
gas
I found it
every
on
time.
Google.
I thought you
Terrible.
like, actually had a picture.
Yeah,
Citation
just take it
manual.
down.
Dabs every time you correctly cite your sources. Okay.
That means the citation manual.
Are they in?
No, it's not correct on my way forward.
I moved it over, but he didn't click on it. He didn't refresh it.
Okay, is it in alphabetical
What do you mean I
order?
didn't
That's the
click on it?
question.
You didn't refresh.
Well, you don't have to refresh on a Google Doc.
Well,
maybe.
Maybe you do now. They went through and updated Google Docs and all that stuff. It's real.
No, if I click on a Google
Look at
Docs,
it.
it should
There it
all.
is. Boom.
Oh, because I'd already hit present.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I didn't realize I'd already hit present, so that's why. Because once you hit present, you're right, it's loaded. And okay, good point. Good
I just
point.
want to point this out that you put W in front of N when it's supposed to be in alphabetical order.
That's going by title.
Yeah, it's by the first
It's by the title in alphabetical order. Doesn't matter about anything else.
So W comes from.
Okay, so while we were doing presentations last class, I added a couple things in
Wait,
here
no, it doesn't.
because they came
It's
up.
gonna be right.
Particularly that I want to make sure you guys look at. So I did not ever talked about the different SATA controller modes, so I added a short article on that, and what the difference between AHCI is than normal bias. So I want to talk about it, but I'd like you guys to read that section when you get a chance, because I wanted to talk about that first, and then we're going to start talking about hard drive. Which one of these pins is the right pen? I guess I'll find out. That one appears to be working. Okay, so we got our drives, and we have to set up some things in BIOS that specifically address the drive and how the drive is going to be used. Okay, so if I've got a drive, whether it's a traditional or a solid state drive, I can use this drive, for instance, well, I can't use this one, but I can be in your laptop and set this up 3 different ways, okay, in BIOS. And those 3 ways traditionally are called, and it could be different words, but legacy settings, AHCI, or RAID. Okay, and they may or may not have all those settings. Okay, I've never seen one that didn't have these 2. Your laptop defaults, if you've got a school issue one, to RAID. Okay, that's the if the BIOS got cleared and it got set up, it defaults to RAID. What's important about this? Well, the important thing is that AHCI addresses particularly solid state drives better, and it uses a solid state drive better than a legacy one, because legacy didn't, when legacy BIOS was set up to talk to this drive, it didn't care how often you talked to anything. It didn't know, the drive just kind of used whatever's free, and it didn't know about any of that. So AHCI does a better job of spreading the information around, using the drive better. But does it matter which one it's in when I initially set it up? Well, kind of, because AHCI or RAID is going to run better on my solid state drive. But what really matters is that I never, ever, what's that mean? Gonna keep dropping on pencils. What's that mean? What's that symbol mean? No, really?
Triforce.
Change.
I knew.
Delta.
Oh.
Okay, and delta is change if no one's ever talked about it in science class. So then I never change it. If I set up my drive as an AHCI drive when I originally install Windows, and then I later change it, I will guaranteed, without any question, get a computer that blue screens all the time on myself. Okay, if it even boots. And I will tell you that what happens sometimes here at Trail is that the battery goes bad on the laptop, the little BIOS battery that saves the fact of how we save that, right? Because that is definitely a setting that's saved in BIOS. If the BIOS battery goes bad, it reverts to the default, which is RAID. And when it defaults to RAID, all of a sudden people bring in the laptops and go, "My laptop blue screens." Okay, and here's the thing. Okay, BIOS battery saves this config, but what else saves the config? Because there is one other thing that saves the config other than that CMOS battery. What is it? Anybody know? What is it?
Hard drive, the other hard.
What?
Hard drive.
No. What other kind of power saves it other than the CMOS battery?
Static.
What?
Wrong.
The wall power.
All power.
Okay, the wall power. So the only time it has to save with the BIOS battery is if power has been removed. If I set this computer up and I never unplug it and the power on the back is plugged in, the BIOS does not go away. It's only when it's completely lost power that it loses it, okay? Or completely turned off and all power is removed. When we're using a laptop, when does that happen? It only happens when the battery is dead, okay? So if you take it out. So I could be running fine right now. The BIOS battery's been dead for several days because I've never had to swap my battery out. And then all of a sudden, my battery's dead. I go down, I unplug the battery, I go down to Mr. Pool's, I swap the battery, I put it in, and now I blue screen. It doesn't make sense to people. It doesn't make sense to people because all I did was swap my battery, okay? But the reason it makes sense when I ask them, they're like, my laptop's all of a sudden blue screen. And you're like, did it start blue screening after you swapped your battery? And they look at you like with cross eyes, right? And like, what does that have to do with anything? Well, it has to do with something because if the BIOS battery already died last week and you never swapped your laptop battery and then all of a sudden you did, you just changed it to the other BIOS setting or the other hard drive setting in BIOS, you made that change and now your computer starts blue screen. So it could be very easily what happened. I don't know what happened to yours, whether it was just the drive died, but all it takes is this getting changed from whatever it was when it was installed and your host. Now, that being said, there are articles on the web, if you go to read it, that you can go into the registry and make registry changes prior to changing the BIOS setting and make it so that it works. Never tried that. I don't think it's worth the test. I'd rather just wipe it. Why were you going to ask it?
How do we know what the default is? The default setting.
Well, that's a good question. You really don't know the default unless you hit set to defaults on your BIOS, and then you go, oops, that's not what I wanted, kind of thing. So the only time you really find out, and now if I was initially setting up a computer, like I go and get a used computer from somewhere, the first thing I do is hit set to defaults. I haven't done anything with the computer yet. So I set it to defaults, and if you get a brand new one, it's on the defaults when you get it, okay? And then you can go, okay, that's not what I want this on, I want this off, maybe it defaults to legacy, I don't know why I never would, and you switch it to that, and the laptops, we know it defaults to RAID because when we hit set to defaults, it's all of a sudden on RAID, which is not what we wanted AHCI. So all of our computers, because AHCI exists on all of them, we put everything on AHCI throughout the district so that we can use the same images here and there. Because if I made an image, set it all up, and I pulled it as an AHCI image, and I send it to Maverick's computer that's set up to RAID, it's still set up as AHCI. As soon as it boots up, it's going to start blue screening, and he's going to go, but you just fixed it, which we've had before. We've had students go, oh, it's blue screening, and my tech students hook it up over here and re-image the thing, and then it's blue screening because they never checked the BIOS to see if the BIOS settings were right. So, and what is the only thing that normally tells you if the BIOS battery has failed? What message do we remember seeing?
Date and time not set.
Date and time not set. Okay, so that is a message I will see how many times? Once, because as soon as I put a laptop battery in again, unless I pull the battery, it's not going to show me that message again, because it's going to, even if the BIOS battery is bad, but I've got a good laptop battery in it, I only get one boot. As soon as I reboot it again, it's not set to the default date and time, so it thinks the date and time set, and I don't see the message again. So students frequently in here will not check the BIOS when somebody says they got a blue screen. They'll just come in, they'll replace the memory, they'll re-image the drive, and they'll go, here you go, and then the student comes back a little while later, and it's blue screening again, because the BIOS wasn't checked. Okay, so that was one thing I wanted to point out, and that's why I put that article in there, and there's a nice video that explains why AHCI is your best choice to use for drives today. That's not a choice on an M.2. An M.2 is just what it is. I don't know what it's a specific controller for that M.2 drive. This is really only setting for our SATA ports, how we want to set up our SATA ports. And they're all set up the same. So you can't say, number one's AHCI, number two's legacy, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Is there any way you can switch the default?
No, that's BIOS setting. That's the BIOS default. If you hit, because on every BIOS there's a button that says reset the defaults. That's programmed by the manufacturer. So why did Dell set up RAID for the laptops? I have no idea. What does RAID mean on a OneDrive system anyway? I mean, I suppose probably on these, and I wouldn't even doubt it at all, that you could probably remove the CD-ROM and put some kind of a second drive bay in here or something. I don't know. I never really looked into it at all.
Hey, that's a good idea for final project.
But that's what it is on this. So just so you know what that is referring to on that video that I added in there for you. And again, hopefully everybody's gone through all this, but I wish there was some way for me. I guess I could have. Didn't think of that. I could have put a star next to the new ones. I'm gonna switch that and turn it. And where's my? Let's see. I added this one, so I'm gonna add a little star at the end of it, so you know that's what I added. And I added controller modes explained at the end of it, which is really important for you guys to understand. And this was somebody else's article that I was happy with the article. And when it says IDE mode, that's legacy right there is what the legacy mode applies to. Now, I really don't understand why it even has a RAID on a laptop. The only thing I can think is what I just said. Is there anything else I added on there? Oh, I added this too, which is none of you guys did one on a helium drive. And so this video is on the difference between a helium versus a standard drive. We've got a bunch of drives that are helium drives in our servers. And what that's talking about is the gas that's inside the drive
That's helium.
is helium.
Oh, because
Okay.
how it runs
Versus air.
That's
And
resistance.
so they, I don't. That's why I put the video on there.
helium has less resistance and probably
Helium's supposed to be a newer, better way of doing a drive. In all cases, they're clean drives, right? If there was a single speck of dust inside a traditional drive, it wouldn't last long because it doesn't take more than a speck of dust to ruin a drive. And you may think, one speck of dust. Well, a speck of dust setting on a CD, spinning at 72,000 RPM, when the head doesn't touch it. When we look at hard drives, these are magnetic writing through magnets basically onto the disk. There is a micro distance between that disk. So I know you guys read all this stuff, but on those traditional drives, there's multiple disks spinning, and each one of those has a head that writes to the top and the bottom of that, and these all move together. So, where's my one that's open? As those disks rotate,
One opens up there.
what?
No.
As the disc rotates, all of these heads, if you look in here, this one only has 2 discs, it's really old. It only has 2 discs in there, and then this is a read-write head, and there's one on the inside and outside, and actually there's a part that's missing from there that somebody ripped off. But this whole actuator arm moves together when it reads. It's not like they move separately. And that distance is so small in there that it doesn't take much for it to ruin if it actually comes in contact, okay? So, I want to talk about some other things on hard drives before we get going. We may not even get to the troubleshooting thing today or not. I don't know. So those are spinning really, really fast. The other thing that I wanted to make sure we understood was defragmentation. There was a reading on defragmentation in there, right?
Yeah.
So this is a disk, and throughout this disk, I'm a terrible drawer, but we'll go ahead and see how good I can do. There are, that's about as good as I can get. There are segments throughout this drive that get written to in little tiny pieces. And so when your drive head is right here, and it's going to write a file, it wants to write it here all together. Okay? It wants to write it as a contiguous file, meaning all together. Okay? And the first time it writes on that drive, it certainly can. Okay? But then the next time it writes something on the drive, if it's in the same spot, maybe it has this little tiny file and it fills up this little area. And then the next time it fills up this little area. And the next time we make an edit on that file and it's a little bit bigger. Well, it can't write it there, so it writes the rest of the file over here. And the next time it writes this file, maybe Mr. Peck made an edit to it and deleted part of it, so part of this gets taken off of what the file needs, and then something else gets added on and adds it on down here. And so over time, on a traditional drive, look at that, right on my desk, right on. Our data on a traditional drive over time gets fragmented. Okay? The data is no longer contiguous, it's spread out over the drive in multiple locations, and so
over time, and that's why people are like, when I first got this computer, it ran so fast, now it runs so slow. Well, that's because you've had that computer for a year, several years, and over time, all of your data got fragmented. And one of the things that adds to fragmentation is the file that's swapped from memory to the hard drive and back and forth multiple times a minute, and that file is called the
I can't remember.
swapped back and forth multiple times a minute, and that file is called the
Oh, what?
No.
No.
swap file. Right, okay, so it's called the swap file. I was giving the answer. Okay, so the Windows swap file is a file that goes from memory to the hard drive whenever the memory is busy. And that swap file is also why the more memory have, the better a computer runs. Because if I've got, and that's why 8 gig is a sweet spot, if I've got 8 gig in my computer right now, may not be the sweet spot in 3 years, right? Right now, 8 gig is a sweet spot. If I've got 8 gig in there, it's going to have minimal writes to the hard drive from the swap file. And the more I have, the less it writes to the hard drive, swapping information back and forth from RAM. And then swapping it back and forth as the big brain, Mr. Peck, the CPU of our computer, asks for it, right? So if the CPU is right here and this is my memory, as I'm working on stuff and I run out of room, I have to put my notes somewhere. So they go over there on the hard drive. And then when I'm back to that thing that I was working on that I need that, it swaps back over here, but I have a finite amount of space in RAM, so then other things have to go over there. So stuff gets swapped back and forth as I'm using a computer. And because those things get swapped back and forth all the time, that also adds to fragmentation. Because maybe I only write one little thing down here for just a minute, and then I save something that now it goes from here to here, and then this gets erased just 30 seconds later, and so a swap file itself adds to fragmentation on our computer because it's going back and forth between the drive. So the more RAM we have, the less we use this swap file. The faster our hard drive is, i.e. SSD, which can't get fragmented at all because it doesn't care where it writes because it can access it all at equal speeds, right? And a good SSD keeps track of where it's written the most and uses that the least. So it's going to go, it's just going to keep writing and using the spot that's the least. But that swap file can also be what ruins this. When you guys had the other laptops, you guys only have 2 gig of RAM in those laptops, okay? Your 2 gig of RAM didn't seem like 2 gig of RAM because it had an SSD to use as a swap file. However, we had multiple SSDs fail because if Cameron is using his laptop all the time and the swap file is going back and forth to this solid state drive all the time, which I'm talking about hundreds if not thousands of times a minute, it eventually will over exceed the number of writes. So that was one of the big things that we wanted to get. I wanted to get you guys to 8 gig, not only so your computers would run better, because really it doesn't make a huge difference when it's writing to a solid state, which is why solid states are great. But the solid state will last that much longer, meaning that the solid state I put in for Colin is going to work for the next 2 students, not just for Colin. So, and we took all those solid state drives that you guys had. Originally, you guys had 60 gig solid state drives. We took all of those and put them in the middle school, and you guys got all new 120 gig solid state drives when we upgraded you to the new computers. Which also makes the solid state last longer because the more space there is on a solid state, the less often it uses any particular spot. So if you use a 2 terabyte solid state, like Colin just showed, and you're only using 500 gig of it, it's going to last even longer because every time it writes, it goes to the least used spot, and there's more least used spots out there. So bigger solid state drives will last longer just for that. Now, if you fill it up, it's still going to, I mean, unless you're reading and writing all the time, it's still going to be long, it's still going to last longer. So bigger is better on the solid state drive. So here's one of the problems with traditional drives. They get fragmented, the data is not contiguous, and then we also have the issue of the access time, because the slower this goes, the longer it takes for the data to get around to it. So the faster drive means faster access of the data. Doesn't mean the data is going to be faster coming out of the cable, because that speed is that speed, and once the head's over it, it's just reading it anyway, right? But if the data is really fragmented, it's got to go all over the place to read that data, realizing there's multiple sides of multiple disks in these, and especially in a laptop drive. You think about this laptop drive. This laptop drive right here is a 500 gigabyte laptop drive. And this drive is I think it's a 250. Yeah, and this is a 250. Okay? Think about the compression of the drives inside this sucker, which compared to this one. Okay? Which is why laptop drives fail all the time, right? All that disks and data are compressed in a little tiny area with micrometer distances between that read-write head and the actual drive, and all Maverick has to do is set it down a little bit hard one time, and all of a sudden it fails. Not harder than you needed to, right?
Well, that
you
would
treat
explain a lot.
you treat your laptop really nice, right? It's my laptop, particularly if you own it, right? I know students don't treat them as nice when they're not theirs, but so it's yours. You want to take care of it. You think I put it down so nice. But if this thing was spinning at 7,200 RPM, when you threw it in your bag and you out the door, you don't know exactly what kind of stresses you just been under. Okay, so let's talk about fragmentation and defragmentation. I don't think I've told you this story. When I first started as a programmer, I worked my way through college at Dayton Power and Light, working on a system called the time of use billing system. And what the time of use billing system did is it said, based on when you use your electricity, we will charge you differently. And we had 1,000 customers that signed up to be part of this test. Because power companies have to make enough power to keep all the businesses going during the daytime, but after 6 or 7 o'clock at night, over 70% of their power that's created is not used. It's just being made for nothing, because factories and everything else tend to run in the day, businesses run in the day, everything's happening in the day, air conditioning is running in the day, right? Air conditioner hardly comes on at night. So all this power is being created that's not being used. So the idea is we can change consumers' purchasing using of power to the nighttime. We save money because we don't have to make as much during the day. So if the time use billing system said between 7 at night and 7 in the morning, you're charged, I think it was 1/5 the rate for your electricity that you used then. Okay, at 20%. You had an 80% cost reduction in the amount of what you got charged. Okay, so the idea is that Harry puts a timer on his water heater so that it only comes on between those hours. You don't want to be at Harry's house between 7 in the morning and 7 at night and take a shower, because it's going to be cold if you're the second person, because the water heater's not coming on. But that's the idea, is that get people to do their laundry after 7 there. Water heater comes on after 7 there. AC's turned on between, anyway. So the way this worked was there was a box that plugged into the wall of all these houses that took the meter reading every 15 minutes. Okay, so right now you get checked once a month by some guy who walks around, and actually that's probably not even true. Usually they come around once every other month, and the in-between month is an average of the last 2. So if you're like, why was it so low last month? And all of a sudden it's high because it got hot, but they didn't actually catch it till the next month, because many power companies don't walk around every month, if you didn't know that. So, but this is doing it every 15 minutes. So every 15 minutes it's taking a meter reading. And then every 24 hours, it's kind of cool the way it worked, that box sent the computer information through the power lines, through the transformer lines. So everybody in your area has got a box just plugged into the wall that reads the meter through the power lines, using that as the communications device, and then communicated it to another one that somebody on the block had to volunteer to have the box plugged into a phone outlet, and then every 24 hours, it phoned in all the data for the people on your transformer back to our thing, okay? So I was on the team that wrote the program that did the billing. And then there was this audio engineer who got paid more than me because the name engineer was on his degree, which really made me mad, that printed out the bills. That's all he did. Print out the bills, put them in envelopes, and sent them out. And he got paid more than me that helped to write the program that did it. And it was, yeah. So anyway, so when he first started doing it, he said that it took about an hour to print out all the bills, and then he'd have the rest of the day. Literally got paid for 8 hours for printing out the bills, putting them in envelopes, labeling them, and sending them off. He got paid $4 more an hour than I did. Am I still holding on to that? So, and then he said by the end of the month, he would start them at 8 in the morning, and they would not be done the next day when he came in. They would still be printing. And he said it'd take 20 minutes per sheet for them to come out. And this is why. The data got so fragmented from being called in every single day, because every single day, Hunter, your house got called in, and that file got added on to the file with your name on it. So now your file is here, and here, and here, and here, and it got so fragmented over time that it took that long for the drive just to go and find all the data. And when you went and listened, this is also maybe because he's an engineer, but he didn't even notice. You go and listen to that computer, and it sounded like there were hamsters in there running around, right? It's just like you hear tick, 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 because this drive is going insane, moving back and forth trying to find that data. And that thing will make noise because it's moving. And if it's just jumping around, you can literally hear in the computer. We defragmented the drive, and it went back to taking 20 minutes to print them all out. Okay, so fragmentation is an issue that can happen on anybody's computer if it's got a spinny drive.
Made so much more money than you should have just left it.
What?
Said he made so much
Let
money.
No, because
Not a
then
spike.
he would sit there and do nothing then. I started it running, and then what did you do the whole rest of the day that you didn't even call us and let us know for a week before? It's like, yeah, it's taking, I started and it gets done the next day. So then he would literally have them all done. First of all, so basically what he's doing is he's sitting there, and every 20 minutes he folds one and then goes back to playing a game or something. I don't know. So we defragmented it. So I wanted to show you that as well if you've never defragmented a drive before. So if I go to Windows Explorer and get it on my, there we go. Come over here. There we go. If I go to Windows Explorer and I go to this PC, I see my drives, and this one's almost full. I'll bet you this one's going to be. So I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go to Properties, and I'm going to go to Hardware. That's not where I'm looking for. Tools, Tools. And then one of the things says optimize and defragment drive. Now I'm going to tell you right now, this tool sucks. The Windows tool has never been a good disk defragmentation drive or program. So I can go there and I'm going to say, look, it says it's 0% fragmented right now. I'm going to hit Analyze and see what it actually says after I've analyzed that drive. Now I might have it defragmenting every night. I don't know.
1% fragment.
So it's 1% fragmented according to Windows. No, now I'm going to use another program, which I'm sure I have on here, called, that's not where, I not added it on here? Called Defragler. Let's see what this one is. No, it's the same one I just came back to. Which one am I using on this computer now? You know what, I'm just going to go and search for Defragler and see if it's still out there. Fragler, there we go. I'm going to download Defragler. It's just from the same people who make CC Cleaner. It's a free download. I thought I already had it on this computer. I'm nervous about where I'm at right now. File upload doesn't make me happy.
Dangerous place.
I'm going to go to, yeah, I'd rather go here. Okay, there. That's what I really like. That other website, I'm already nervous that I was even there. So I'm going to go to downloads and I'm going to install Defragler. I know I've got something defragmented in this hard drive right now, but downloads and
defragler. And this is one I use at home, so I don't know what I'm going to install on this one right now. Do you want to install it? Yes. Okay, so I'm going to go to that same drive, and I'm going to tell it to analyze the drive. Into recycle bin. Sure.
Gigabytes of free space. I think
So the start. Okay. So the neat thing about defragler, the thing I like, is we're going to see a color-coded thing here of which sectors, and this is multiple sectors in here, but the idea is that are fragmented or not. Now Windows just said I was 1% fragmented, and as I look at this, it says 14%, and I don't believe Windows at all. Okay, because I don't think the Windows tool works at all. This now shows which ones are good, they're in blue, and which ones are bad, they're in red. And if I go down here, I can even click on the individual spot, and it says 76 files are in this one block right now, and how many fragments of each one of those files are in there. And I can go as well to the file list. Let me go to this one. It's actually pretty good overall. This particular file is only broken up into 125 fragments over those locations in the drive. Okay? And if I tell it to defragment, and the cool thing about defragler is I don't have to defragment the whole drive. I could just defragment that one file. Oh man, I really want that fixed. So I can just say, hey, I want to defragment that one file, and it's going to go, and it moved all those pieces of that file then to that one location. That fast. Okay? So the cool thing about defragler is if I know what I'm having a problem with, I can just fix that one thing, or I can just say, hey, you know what, drive D, I don't like saying, and now it's 13% fragmented. I can just go and say, hey, I want to fragment the whole thing, and it says, okay, so there's 7,287 fragmented files on my drive right now, with 18,187 different fragments spread out along the drive. The other thing that this will also let you do is it will let you speed up the drive if you want to by moving the most important things to the area on the drive that gets accessed the fastest. So you can optimize the files in your drive with a good defragmenter, and the Windows system does not do any of those things at all, which is why I wanted to show you the other one first, because I have never had it say anything close. Yeah.
So what does this tell like the motherboard and BIOS to do that Windows doesn't?
Well, Windows doesn't tell it at all. Windows doesn't care if you're totally clobbered fragmented. It will let you be 99% fragmented, and it will be like, I'm okay! Doesn't care. Okay? So Windows, by default, does not ever try to defragment your drive. My point being, when I show you this, is if you don't have a solid state drive at home, that doesn't mean you're totally hosed. It means start your computer running a defragmentation program at night when you're not using it, well, or in Collins, during the day while you're at school, because at night we know he's when he does most of his work, right, at 3 a.m. So have it defragment while you're here at school. So you can go, if I download the defragler, I can go and say, I'm right click right here, I can go to advanced, where's it at? Maybe it's up here at setting. Okay, so I can go to setting, I could say, hey, I want to schedule you to defragment the D drive on a schedule every day at 8 a.m. And every day at 8 a.m., if your computer's on, it will defragment whatever needs to be defragmented. It won't do it all. I mean, it will do it all. It won't do it every. But if those files are not fragmented, it's going to leave them alone. So it's going to go through all these things. The first time you defragment, if your drive is terrible, and I'm going to go to one of the servers, and we'll see how terrible it is. If I go there, no, that's not a good. All my servers are on solid states. I can't. You don't defragment solid states ever, by the way. Even if I go here and say I know this is a solid state drive, and I say analyze this, even if it says it's fragmented, it doesn't matter, because what does defragmenting do on a solid state? It does nothing for performance, and it makes things get rewritten and it wears out your write cycles.
So there would be no reason to ever defrag, even though it says it's 17% fragmented. The fact that it's a solid state drive, I think it will warn me if I say, it doesn't even say defragment, it says optimize. Optimize operation will zero fill your drive. This will reduce your drive free space temporarily. No, I don't want to do that. I don't even know what that does. The last thing I want is, I'd have to read on what that does. Quick optimize.
Do any of those have hard drives? The computers behind you?
Yeah, I mean that one does. We could look at that one too to see how fragmented that one is. And then I've got, this one. Let's see. Let's go ahead and analyze this. The other thing is it tells you disk health right there. This is based on the drive reporting to the operating system what the health is from its own health check. Does that mean that drive could be failing? Of course it does. But this one, there's hardly anything on this drive. So there is a bunch of stuff on this drive, but it's a 3 terabyte drive and it's mostly empty. So this one, if I wanted to, that's hardly. There's 221 fragmented files. I don't know if it's even worth my time on that one. And look, the biggest fragmented file was 13 fragments. That's like nothing. It's a Steam library thing too, which I don't even know what it's doing on there. So anyway, so that's file fragmentation. And I wanted to really bring this so that you guys understood if you're having a problem, we don't go around and defragment drives. And the reason we don't is all the programs and OSs are on solid states trail. No reason to defragment that. The other data is on like the teachers and like this one. This has 2 drives, just like the ones we talked about in our project. It has a solid state for the programs and has a traditional drive for the user data. Yes, it could get fragmented, but it doesn't have that much data on it. Most people don't have that much, okay? And because we've got more memory in them, it doesn't write to the swap file that much. You have to worry about it. There's one other thing that you can do on your computer that will eliminate or reduce swap file issues, okay? So if I go to the system properties and I go to change settings, one of the things I've got up here is advanced and performance, okay? So if I go to advanced, performance, and advanced again, right here you can see what the virtual memory swap file is, okay? Paging files an area of the hard disk that Windows uses as if it were RAM. It's where it swaps information back and forth for RAM. The total paging file for all drive is 4 gig right now. So your swap file is completely turned off on your computer, I think. I think we turned it off on the thing. But we can also decide something that can help us from having that fragmentation. So right now it says automatically manage paging file for all drives. I'm going to uncheck that. There's no file on C, there's no file on D, and on C it says it's system managed, and it's a system managed size. What does that mean? It means I can make it be whatever I want. I'm Windows when I say this. I can make it be whatever I want when I want it. If I go, and because it recommends 4 gig, I can go and say, you know what? I want it to be between this size and this size, and set it. And what does that do when I say that between this size and this size? It says to Windows, here is your paging file. It is this big. Never move it again. Because it's always that big. So it stops shrinking and growing that swap file. It just says you've got this much room, use it. That's all you get. And it stops fragmenting your hard drive. Because it stops getting bigger and smaller throughout the use of
One
that
of my
drive.
drives had a fragment of 1624. That's a lot of fragments.
1624, yeah. I don't,
Thank you, System 32.
yeah. So I wanted to talk about that in general. The more fragmented your drive is, potentially the sooner your drive will fail. And the reason I say that is because just like any part on your car or anywhere else, the more you use it, the quicker it will wear out. If this sucker is going all over the place, back and forth, to as quickly get to that data as possible, 100% of the time, it's going to wear out. Which is why we can say this is mean time failure of 2 million hours. Okay, so when they do that, are they continually reading and writing to it? Or are they just putting a file on it and saying, for the next 2 million hours, I can get to that file? Well, if that head's just sitting there, how's that going to wear out, right? So if you keep your drive defragmented, it's also going to use the parts less. And theoretically, they don't have any data on this, but I'm saying from my experience in life, it's probably going to make the part last longer because you're not beating it up. Okay, so I would highly recommend you think about I'm trying to think what the name of the other program, because my thing is defragmented enough that I would think I just put defragment on there. What's the name of the other program that we used? Because there's another one just like it that does the same kind of thing, and I must not have installed it on this one. But I've been a defragler fan forever. So anyway, so that's one other thing you can do to stop the paging file from fragmenting you is just say how big it is. You say, okay, it's going to say, hey, you have to restart your computer, and hopefully it's not going to make me restart my computer later. So next time I restart my computer, it's going to set it at 4 gig, and it's going to leave it at 4 gig.
That doesn't reduce the number of writes.
Does it reduce the number of writes? No. By setting it, now if you turn it to 0, it definitely does. If you've got 8 or more gig of RAM, and you've got a solid state that you're trying to make last longer, you could set it to 0 on the paging file, and it will definitely reduce the writes because now it gets none. The downside, there's a point where you'll run out of RAM. You will. It'll say out of memory. And when we did it last year, we did a test. I think it was like 32 tabs on Chrome, and you'd run out of RAM with 8 gig of RAM. So, and it was like 120 copies of the calculator. One of the students just kept sitting here hitting the calculator.
Yes.
That's so funny. You just sit
And then it finally just died because it's out of memory. It doesn't have any more memory to open another program. And because there's no swap file, it can't say this one's not being used, which is what it does. I'm swapping you over here so that I can continue to do this because you're not really active anyways. Because no one really uses 32 tabs at the same time, right? You're using the one you're looking at. The other ones are just wasting memory in the background that you want to go back to later. And that's why I use the Great Suspender. Did I push that to all your guys's? Yeah. So basically what it does is if I leave this open for a while, this is the Great Suspender right here. What it does, and I'll show you what it looks like. Suspend all of the tabs. Okay, so it goes, if I'm using this tab a long time and I got these other tabs open, it goes and says, oh, it puts it to sleep, frees up all the memory this tab was using because you haven't actually gone to it. And when I want to use it again, I just click on here and then it comes back to wherever it was.
That's actually cool.
What?
Well, the other tab that you just clicked off should be suspended.
No. It's time. It's like 30 minutes of not being. You can set what the time is on the Great Suspender. So if you add that in the, and I don't even know. Let's see what I have mine set up. So mine's set at 30 minutes. So automatically suspend tabs that are unused for 30 minutes, and never suspend a pin tab, never suspend a tab that contains unsaved form inputs. So if you're working on something like a Moodle paper or Google paper, well, Google automatically saves. So, but if there's something waiting to be saved, it won't suspend it. This is a checkbox. You can never suspend tabs that are playing audio. So if I got Pandora open, Pandora's going to keep playing. I'll have to keep going back to the Pandora to re-hit it. Never suspend active tab in each window, so the one I'm on. Okay, so if I'm on this tab, even if I haven't touched it for an hour and a half, it's not going to suspend it. But all the other ones, it goes and frees up that memory. It's better for your computer, right? Everything else is going to run better. You're not going to run out of RAM. So actually, another tech guy told me about that one, and I added that one. And I think it's great. You guys can add it to your Chrome too. And you don't have to set it 30 minutes, right? You can set it, it doesn't drop down. You can set it whatever time you
I
want.
said to an hour.
Yeah, the first option is 20 seconds.
Okay, that's a little slow or a little fast. I mean, it's like I haven't touched it in 20 seconds. Dude, I guess if you add a computer with a limited amount of RAM, if you had 2 gig of RAM in your PC, maybe you want it to be 20 seconds. Because again, it won't do it to the window you're on. Just means if you left that window and you're over here working on this window, it goes, oh, haven't touched me, go to sleep, so that it frees up that memory.
That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
How do you go to the thing that you went to earlier again?
Where you can shut off the fragmentation.
So what are we talking about? Oh, set up the swap file. So if I go Windows pause break, I get to the control panel here. There's lots of other ways to get there if yours doesn't work like that. If I right click on this PC and go to properties, it also goes to the same place. So once I'm here on system properties, I go to change settings, then to advanced, and then to performance settings, and then to advanced again, and that's where, and then to virtual memory. And that's where you can change. The teacher systems are set to not even use the C drive as the swap file. We have their spinny D drive is where the swap file is. Does that slow it down? Yeah, theoretically, if it uses a swap file, the swap file is slower than using the SSD, but they also only have 60 gig SSDs and we don't want to wear them out. So we turned off the swap file on the C, turned on the swap file on the D because it's a traditional spinny drive. So when it does need it, they never run out of RAM. It might be slower because they got a lot of stuff open, but it's going to make that solid state drive last that much longer. If you've got more than 8 gig, if you've got 16 gig of RAM and you've got a laptop with a solid state drive that's not huge, if you go and read articles about it, many people say it'll make things fail if you turn off the swap file. I've never ever had something fail with swap file, not once. So what are they having fail? I don't know. Other than run out of RAM when we tested it and see how many Chrome tabs we can open up. But when I'm just using it, my laptop doesn't have the swap file on. It's got 16 gig of RAM in it, and I've never ever had an issue with it. Not once. So. Okay, so that's kind of a connecting our memory to our hard drive there. I wanted to make sure you understood the definition of contiguous and what fragmentation was, and all my tech students get a plaque that says, "May your life be contiguous, unfragmented, and error-free." That's what it says on the plaque. I really like that plaque. And if you haven't been in my class, people are going, "What the heck does that mean?" Now you know what it means. So, in other words, no interruptions in your life plan, contiguous, unfragmented, nothing gets in your way, and error-free, right? So, I thought that was really funny when I came up with that several years ago. Okay, so I've showed you how to use defragler. I've showed you what fragmentation looked like. I've showed you that the Windows fragmentation thing does not work. I guarantee it. You go on any machine, ask it how fragmented it is. I never see it be above 5%, and that was on a drive that was like 79% fragmented on other fragmentation tools. So, why? I don't know. You can schedule the Windows defragmenter to run just as well as you can have this one do it. I think this one actually works. So I don't think the Windows one works at all. So that's an opinion. I'm sure somebody from Microsoft there watching this just shot a missile at me.
Well, I'm saying, what is defragler doing software-wise that Windows isn't?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you. Why do they say that it's only 1% fragmented? Maybe what they're calling fragmented is different. Like defragler's saying, if it's fragmented, it's fragmented. If you're a file and you exist in 2 different locations, you're fragmented. And maybe Windows is saying, well, as long as you're in less than 10 locations, you're not fragmented. We're okay with 10, which is probably what it is, right? They're saying they're setting a level of fragmentation they accept as not being fragmented. You know, if you're not all over the place, then we're okay with it. It's only if you're, 200 different places that file matters. Because we saw on there, on this one, I think I closed it. Did I close it? I think I closed it. Defrag. Then on this one, when we look at the number of files that are fragmented, you have to analyze every time you come in. That maybe, look, this one's 89 fragments, 101. As we go down here, maybe all these ones that have 4, they don't even count. They're not counting them until they get to a certain number of fragments. So look, all those are less than 4. It isn't until we get up here that it gets up. There, all of a sudden we're at 5 different pieces to that file. And maybe Windows is saying if it's less than 5, it doesn't count, which would make sense. That's probably about only 1% of the file, they're just not counting everything as a fragmentation. Well, if you have to go like this to get the file, it still counts to me. That's why I don't think the Windows, I mean, it has to be something like that. They've got some level of what they're saying is acceptable fragmentation. And this is just saying if it's fragmented, which is why it's nice. You can go and say, you know what? I agree with Windows. I'm only going to do these, and I'm going to just defrag those, and it's going to go through those files relatively quickly. The other thing is, if you're a gamer, and you just want Skyrim to run faster, you can go and look for the Skyrim files because you could do it over here on the path. I'm going to go ahead and stop this for a second to show you what I mean. I can go to the path, and now all the things that are in the same folder are together, and I can say, okay, you know what? This is my Skyrim folder. I'm pretending. Okay, right there. I want to defragment Skyrim so that my game runs and plays faster. You can do that with this too, which you can't do with the Windows one. You can't select folders or files to go ahead and say those are more important to me. But on this, I certainly can. I'm just trying to get this to run faster and to run better, so I can just select that folder, which you saw me do, and then it's defragmenting. Basically, all my video files are fragmented all over the place, but they're big files, so anyway. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about, I'm going to go ahead and stop this. By the way, it doesn't hurt anything as it's defragmenting. If I go ahead and hit stop, it's going to finish whatever file it was working on, because basically all this is doing, when we look at a hard drive, there is a table over here that says this file exists here, 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 here in that table. And it reads the file allocation table first to see where the file exists on this drive. Okay, so it's going through that file allocation table and saying, first of all, where is there enough space that I can get all four of these things together? Move that piece here, rewrite the table. Move that piece here, rewrite the table. Move this piece here. That's what it's doing when it's defragmenting. Okay. Also, when you delete, deletions, all deletions do is delete this on the file allocation table. When you delete a file, it doesn't touch the data on the hard drive at all. The only way the data on the hard drive disappears is the next time I write a new file, if it uses that spot on the file allocation table, it overwrites the data then. Which is why if people delete something, most of the time, if they haven't been using the drive a lot, I have a program I can just go in and it goes and finds all those bits and pieces and rewrites the file allocation table. It's a program I bought called Get Data Back when Norton Antivirus destroyed my entire photo drive at home. And my wife about had a meltdown. Every photo we've ever taken is gone.
How bad?
It is right now. Well, it thought there was a virus on my machine and it rewrote the boot sector of my drive where the file allocation table lived. So in effect, it said your drive is now empty. And so my D drive, where my photos were, all of a sudden showed nothing in it. So I ran Get Data Back and it rewrote the whole file allocation table and everything was fine. So, but I just wanted you to do that as well. Okay, so where are we at? The next thing I wanted to talk about was the rule of divide and conquer. Okay, and this is about troubleshooting. When we troubleshoot, we can't troubleshoot everything at the same time. And we don't want to troubleshoot everything at the same time because then we don't know what actually went wrong. If Harry brings his laptop in, which my tech students have a tendency to do because it's easier, okay? If Harry brings in this laptop and it's blue screening, what can cause it to blue screen? The operating system load, the hard drive, the memory, okay? There's a number of different things that go, and we all also know that, finger up, the BIOS setting, right? All of those is really related to the hard drive. Could make this sucker blue screen. The easiest thing for me to do is to just change them all at one time, okay? So they open it up, they put it in tested memory, they hook it up, and they re-image the whole drive and rewipe the whole thing. Did I ever find out what was wrong?
No.
Absolutely not. I have no idea what was wrong. I just did the blanket, I'm going to fix it all. Which I'm going to say 90% of the time works. because I re-wiped the hard drive and I changed out the memory, and then we put the memory up over there and we test the memory on our own at our leisure, so that we only grab memory that's been tested. So I know that what I just put in there, memory's good. I just wiped the hard drive. It comes back, it's blue screened again. I just had it changed out, so what could it be? I only eliminated one thing from the equation when I just did that, and that was the memory, okay? So the idea of divide and conquer is that instead of doing everything, we try to do one thing at a time. This works for what we're doing with student laptops, and I don't object to how we do it. But if it was your PC at home, can you just swap out the RAM and wipe the drive, and everybody in the house is okay with it? Probably not. His mom would kill him, right? So what'd you do? It blue screened on me for a minute, and I just wiped the whole thing. Okay. Did we find out what was wrong? No, we have no idea what was wrong. We just kind of band-aided the entire computer and hoped that we covered the one spot that was wrong. Okay, but maybe we didn't. Maybe the hard drive is bad on this one. Maybe the BIOS wasn't set up because we didn't get those two things, right? So then I have to look and see the. So my point is, with divide and conquer is when you have an error, if you can't figure it out, break it down to the components that we know we have to have, and slowly add back the components that we don't have to have. So in order for a PC to run, what components do we have to have? Okay, we have to have a motherboard.
Power supply.
We have to have power.
CPU.
We have to have a CPU.
OS.
We have to have a memory. And that is it. That's it, period. We do not need an operating system for a computer to run. Okay, is BIOS an operating system? Yes, it is, kinda, okay? So those are the 4 key ingredients that we have to have. Of these key ingredients, what of them can I test without even turning on the computer? Okay, power, okay? So if I've got a problem with the computer, I can easily test the power supply by just pulling the power supply tester, one of the power supply testers, I don't know where the third one went, out of the box and testing the power supply, okay? If it passes on this one, it's most likely a good power supply. I'm going to give it a 90%, okay? If it passes on this one, I'm going to give it a 75%, because there are power supplies that this basic tester still failed on this one. It's happened once or twice, okay? But I can easily, and this one's cheap and easy to get on Amazon, I could easily check my power supply. So I have pulled that one out of my equation right off the get-go when my computer isn't working, okay? And I'm saying right now in this scenario the computer doesn't work, i.e. it won't come on. I push the power button and I get nothing, okay? So other things that I can test on here, I can't really test anything else on a computer that won't start at all, right? But I can make sure everything else is out of the equation, okay? I unplug everything else. I unplug the keyboard, the mouse, any USBs, plug it in the back, everything else to see if I can get this computer to turn on. And I think I said at the end of the last class, it's only happened once in my career, but I had a keyboard that if that keyboard was plugged in, that computer would not start at all. And it was so frustrating because I bring everything back, I brought the computer back, I plug it in, turn it on, and then it's running. Well, that's weird. And I go and do a hard drive test, and I did a memory test on it, and all those things work fine. I'm like, I don't know. I took it back, and actually I didn't take it back. I gave it to Maverick, or one of my students. I said, Maverick, go plug this in down in room 202 or wherever it came from. Plugged in, and he comes back with the computer. It won't work. I'm like, what do you mean it won't work? Plug it in. Plugs it in, it works fine. I send him back down there. It doesn't work. Finally, I'm like, replace everything. What? Everything. I want you to replace everything down at that workstation. So he takes down power cords, keyboards, mice, everything. Comes back with all the other stuff. It worked. I'm like, okay, test all that stuff. So then we put up another PC, and he plugs in the keyboard. He turns on the PC, and the PC doesn't come on. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. So what do we do with the keyboard?
Yeah, I did one of these. I broke it in half of it. I really did. The keys went everywhere. And then I threw it away, right? Guys, I was so frustrated. I spent a lot of time on something that I should have known better to just eliminate. But I never thought part of that the keyboard would do that. So if I've eliminated everything, and I can't eliminate video, there's no way I won't see if it boots, right? I can try to boot it and turn it on with no video connected to see if the fans come on with it open, and I do that. Everything looks like it's on. Okay, I can hit the power button and let it shut down. Now I'm going to plug in video. Does it still look like it comes on? It is possible for something to be wrong with the video, okay, as well. Okay, next time I promise we're going to test memory and hard drives. We're going to do it all in here. So don't put anything out next time. Next time we're going to do one per table. You guys will have to team up a little bit. And we're going to unplug, plug in, see what it's like when it's disconnected, when I've got some bad hard drives and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
We'll play with all that next class.
On the left, you find a bad keyboard.
I got a whole box of. I've tried submersing one in water before and it doesn't ruin it. So I don't know.
They're gonna be here because we was too many.
We'll record it for you guys. You'll be able to watch it.
Awesome.
It means it's going to be 4.
What is?
Is this gonna have
Yeah, they can just